Welcome to Sunday Morning Quarterback with Jay Stockwell and Bob Frady. All right, so we're back. Uncle Bob, UB, we'll call you UB. Let's talk about the agenda today. So I'll talk a little bit about who we are. People need to know that. They don't know who we are, but there's a reason we're here, and it's pretty specific. Number two, I'm going to start then in the preseason episode with Colin Cowherd came out and said Nebraska will never be good 10 days ago. I completely disagree with that, and I have a thesis as to why that is a falsity. But once I make that thesis, I want to help everyone manage expectations for this year, because I think the worst thing we can do as Nebraska fans, we've been doing it for 20 years, is get out and get over our skis with enthusiasm, even though I love everything I'm seeing from Matt Rule.
Okay, you need to stop right there, Stockwell. You need to stop right there. Everyone, get over your ski tips. It's time. I haven't been this excited since Scott Frost became coach. Let's go.
So I'm gonna elicit my thesis, coach everyone to manage expectations. Bob has a different point of view, but then Bob's going to talk conference realignment, and we'll both talk about the potential future conference schedule, which is going to be amazing. And then I'll go into recruiting summary. We're going to talk about Nebraska running the ball, and then we're going to get into predictions. But this podcast is sponsored by David Max. Everyone from Nebraska has been touched by David Max. He is the founder of HuskerMax.com. He's going to be our season-long sponsor and our first guest today. So really excited to have David on here in about 20 minutes.
Okay, Stockwell, you should change that sentence to everyone has been touched by David Max's work. Because I'm pretty sure that David Max reaching out and touching everybody is not necessarily welcome behavior. You know what you need? You need some sensitivity and bias training, I think you should talk to your HR folks and say, hey, listen, I need some training here.
Especially during COVID, right? But we're out of COVID. Back to who we are. So the first point of the agenda. And by the way, any questions about the agenda, Uncle Bob? Any UB?
Listen, I'm just following along. So
okay.
No.
Right.
I want to get to the predictions first. I can't wait for the predictions. I'm ready. But until then, We'll go through the rest of the agenda.
All right. So first, who are we? So Bob and I, 17 years ago, did a podcast called Man Island Radio, 70 episodes. It's still available on iTunes. And we concluded at that point that there was no future in podcasting. And so
it's real smart. I'm smart.
And despite that inability to predict the future, we managed to go off and both have somewhat successful business careers. And at the time, we were both doing stand-up comedy because we were both going through a divorce, and the comedy thing was just an outlet for me, and it was awesome. That's how I met Bob. Go ahead, Bob.
I want you to think about something, though, with that statement. When you think about five-tool athletes, there aren't very many five-tool athletes. People say that they are, but they're not. People can be really good at one thing and kind of stink at the other. No, five tools, forget about it. There's no five-tool athlete. Everybody stinks at something. Ours is in predicting the future of podcasts. So, there we go.
Let's just be clear about something relative to being comedians. There's only one comedian on this podcast that ever opened on the weekend.
Never opened on the weekend. Hey, listen, only one of us was ready. And it wasn't the guy who did it. So I was there, and boy, I'm still scarred from that.
So
because I wrote most of it, I feel bad. I'm like, you did that set. I wrote most of it. It's like, these jokes are really funny. Why are people laughing? I'm like, that's because maybe the jokes aren't that funny.
Plus, I gave Robert Hartman a discount on some work I was doing for him as a marketing firm. But
yeah.
Anyway, do that as it may. So what else qualifies us? Well, really nothing. We are fans. Bob has become a fan. Okay. I'm a lifelong Nebraska guy. But the other thing is...
Born and raised in?
Yeah. Hardington, Cedar County, County 13, Cedar County, 1,857 people. Home of Russ Hochstein, probably puts us on the map from a Nebraska football standpoint. Really fun place to grow up. We'll talk more about Hardington in a future episode. My wife doesn't really like it, though, ever since we went there and found out that Casey's General Store was the #1 rated restaurant on TripAdvisor. So,
hey, it's good. It's good. You're hungry. Casey's is right there. Casey's always impresses me. I love Casey.
Slim Jims, sunflower seeds, that's all you need. But Bob and I are also donors at Nebraska. If you're not a donor yet, I encourage it because it is fun. These people have a lot of resources at their fingertips to entertain donors. And boy, oh boy, do you get some great access. And it's just a tremendous amount of fun to be a part of. and the money's going to good things. So I highly, highly encourage any listeners of means to get involved in the program at Nebraska. We can introduce you if you need be. We are not experts, but boy, are we loaded with opinion. So that's the background. That's anything else to add to that, Bob?
No, we're just two old guys talking about college football. Talk about, I think Glory Days should be our theme song. And pass you by, Glory Days. So let's talk about it. Let's have a podcast about college football, about 19-year-olds. Like,
Bob Frady.
I have a 19-year-old.
Bob Frady making big contributions already. All right. So moving on from who are we? So the other day I was listening to, I watch The Herd all the time. I'm a big fan of Colin Cowherd. But I was just sitting there and he was talking about the conference expansion, and he just blurted out without really thinking about it, Nebraska will never be good again. And I beg to differ. And here's the reason why. I would love to see this analysis done and put Nebraska leadership up against any other leadership in the United States for all Power 5 conferences. Let me just kind of go down the list, okay? First of all, Tom Osborne is still alive, 86 years old. Listen to this. 255, 49-3, 15 conference championships, 3 national championships. He was a member of the Congress of the United States. Just an incredible run. And unfortunately for all of us that grew up with that, we've all been trying to relive that for the last 20 years and really got excited when Scott Frost came in. We're not going to go into bashing Scott Frost, but Tom Osborne really set the standard nationally as one of the all-time greats, Hall of Fame coach. Okay, still alive, still involved. Matt Rule looks up to him. Number 2, Ted Carter, the president of the university system. This guy, literally, so I'm a retired naval officer. I taught at the Naval Academy. He was superintendent of the Naval Academy. He's a Top Gun graduate, 125 combat mission, 2,000 carrier landings on 19 aircraft carriers. They just don't hand the superintendent of the Naval Academy job to anybody. He's the president of the Nebraska system. This was in part what helped attract Matt Rule to Nebraska, because when Rule was coach of Temple, he played Navy when Ted Carter was superintendent. So you got the combination of Tom Osborne and Ted Carter both having a tremendous amount of influence. And then I think we have the best athletic director in the Big Ten. And I mean, how many guys are come out of the he's a player, Dit Butkus Award winner, Jack Lambert Trophy, Consensus All-American 1993, has his jersey retired. And then he had 12 years of experience in the athletic director role at UNO. And I think the best evidence I can present to you of how skilled he is the hiring of Matt Rule. I think Rule is absolutely perfect. And I think Matt Rule I don't think he's going to hop again like he did at Baylor to the pros. He's been to the pros. That didn't go so well. He's now back in college where he's comfortable. He's a rebuilder. He's going to rebuild. So I think Matt Rule has the chance to become Tom Osborne great over time. And I think Trev Alberts, as his boss, is going to stick with him and give him the time to rebuild. And in business, where Bob and I have spent the majority of our time the last 20 years, leadership matters. Leadership is everything. And I think we've got the best leadership maybe in the nation. And I'd love to see that analysis. I haven't obviously done it even for the Big Ten, let alone nationally, but I just think we've got a really good situation here. Plus, we have facilities that are absolutely second to none, especially with the Go Big project that's opening this year. Bob, any comments on that? That is why, by the way, that is why Colin Cowherd is wrong, and I'm going to make sure he gets this clip and he hears my rationale. It may take some years. It's going to take some years probably, but I think we've got the ability to make that happen. What are your thoughts, Bob?
Here's the thing. All the leadership structure is nice. It comes down to winning. If you have a good coach and you win, you'll become relevant again. It's as simple as that. Alabama, not very good between the Bear Bryant years and had some down years, I should say, in Nick Saban coming to town. Nick Saban turned them into a machine because he's a great coach, and great coaches who develop players who go to the pros become better recruiters because they could say, hey, you want to go pro? Come with me. Now, Matt Rule sent a few people to the pros. He's doing pretty good with that. So if he gets the right kids, he puts them in the right system, coaches them up well enough, anybody can be relevant again. But when you have someone with the facilities of Nebraska, then, you've got just as much of a shot as anybody else at becoming relevant. Now, yeah, there aren't as many 300-pounders walking around the streets of Nebraska as there are in some places with more population. But that doesn't matter a whole hill of beans. What's the kid from Bryce Young? He's from California. Goes to Alabama because he gets the best shot at going to the pros. So that's the whole deal. Anybody can become relevant if you can get guys to the major leagues. And he's got just as good a shot.
Since you bring it up, let's talk recruiting right now. So he finished in the 2024 class I'm talking right now, out of the gates, 5th in the Big Ten, behind the biggest programs, and 15th overall for 2024. So the guy can recruit. He's doing some smart things in Texas with camps. He's recruiting the state. And he's just got relationships all over the place because of the previous coaching jobs he's had. And geographic. He's down in Texas for a long time, out on the East Coast. So this guy can recruit. His staff can recruit. So that kind of brings me back to managing expectations for this year. I think, and we'll get into predictions here in a minute, but I think 6-6 in a bowl game would be a huge first step for Matt Rule. Remember, we did not go to a bowl game in the entire Scott Frost era. And here's why I think this would be very good. I'd listened to a lot of the Husker podcasts, too, that I really like, by the way. Nick Bahe, B-A-H-E, and Husker Doc Talk, Rob Zadika. And I think his name is Travis Justice, I think, is the other guy. Nick Bahe pointed something out that I think is really good. You know a lot about fantasy football. You've probably heard of Pro Football Focus, right, Bob?
Oh, sure. Yep.
Yeah. So they did their preseason for the Power 5 conference for the preseason all-conference teams. Did 3 teams for the Big Ten. This group analyzes talent for fantasy football, knows a lot about who's going to the pros and not. There's not one Nebraska player on any of the preseason Pro Football Focus teams. This is what Nick Bahe put out. Not one Nebraska player on 3 teams. Okay, so that's
to which I say, so what? Big freaking deal.
But
people don't even know what they're having for lunch tomorrow, and that they're going to try to tell you who's going to the pros. Like, come on.
Yeah. I don't think that's going to be the way it ends up, because I think Matt Rule and team are going to have the opportunity to coach them. But it just is one little data point that I think is really important to look at as Matt Rule comes in. So he's been dealt a hand. We don't know how good that hand is, but I think he's well known as a developer. And from what I can tell, he's listening to Osborne in terms of the way he organizes his practices. It's way different than Scott Frost did it. Much more activity, much more reps for all groups. People are going to develop in that program. So really excited about it. Go ahead.
I think the previous coach should be like Voldemort. Just don't say his name. Or like Beetlejuice. If you say his name 3 times, it's just going to show up on the podcast. Don't say it. We'll just call him the former coach, and we wish him the best. That's it. He's out. He's done. Stop giving him so much heat. Just leave him alone. He's out.
The other big concern I have, and this may be related to why they're talking about running the ball. First of all, this Jeff Sims is a beast. The guy's 6'4", around 200 pounds, physical specimen. But in 25 games at Georgia Tech, according to sportsreference.com, he had 23 interceptions. And according to BTN, which I watched their trip to Lincoln for camp, that is the most of any active FBS quarterback, most turnovers. Now, again, it's going to be under Matt Rule. They're obviously aware of this problem. They're going to be coached very well, and he's got a stable of running backs to hand the ball off to. And then I think he can run a couple of times a quarter. So we'll see how that goes. But that's a big concern. So we could, that could cost us some games. And we all saw how the turnover bug bit us in the context of the Scott Frost years. Oops, there I am again, Mr. Voldemort.
Beetlejuice.
So those are just the talent level and the level of turnovers coming in for incoming quarterback are concerning. So that's why I think 6-6 is potentially a very good outcome for this year and a bowl game.
You know what? You're just lying to yourself because you're afraid to be optimistic.
I've been Bob,
What's wrong?
I've been
What's wrong with
waiting-
you, Stockwell?
I-
Was this
I've
like
been
some
waiting
sales
for.
thing? We're only going to sell $2 worth of our product next year, and like you're going to sell like 20. It's like well, it's just two. We're young. We haven't been coached up. It's like come on, have some faith.
It's the art of low expectations, right? So
No, you have to have high expectations.
yeah,
That way,
yeah.
if you fall short, then you still do pretty good.
All right. So
6-6 in a bowl game. Yeah, then you go into like, the Bucky Beaver Bowl or whatever crazy name, the Roof Condition Bowl or some weird like the Alka-Seltzer Bowl.
Sure.
I don't even know what the bowl names are anymore. There are all these crazy names come in and go out. You don't want to go to that bowl. You want to go to a good bowl.
6-6 would be a huge step forward. That's all I'm saying.
Well, we'll get there when we get to the projections.
All right. So some pretty big news in conference realignment. This was assigned to you in the pre-podcast planning. Talk to me.
Yeah.
I
hate it. I hate it
You
with
hate
the heat of 1,000 suns. I hate it. You know
Why?
how hard it is to get to Lincoln? You know how
Man.
hard it is to get to Lincoln? Or for Lincoln people to get anywhere else?
Yeah.
You can't, there's not even a nonstop to LA right now. And then you're gonna try to put 3,000 people on it, going to LA for a weekend. It's like terrible idea.
I am not Nebraskans will go anywhere for any.
But here's the thing. I'm not concerned. Listen, I'm not concerned about the football team. They get a charter jet. They just fly here. They fly there everywhere they go.
Yeah.
There's a couple of things. It's the non-football sports that really are going to suffer. It's like if you play field hockey, you have to go to Rutgers, and then take all your exams. And there are no pros. Maybe there's some, but there's no big money payday for those athletes. They're the ones who get hosed in this whole thing. And it's just a big money grab. And where's the regional? Like, who would you rather face? USC or Oklahoma every year? It's like, you want to face Oklahoma. There's a regional rivalry there. You want to face Texas. You want to face the old Big 8 opponents because there's a reason to.
All those are going to be maintained, Bob. But here's the thing. This is where I agree with Colin Cowherd. This is what I like. One of the segments he does where Colin was right or Colin was wrong. What it's going to create is more big games, and that I absolutely love. Think about like the Nebraska UCLA, Nebraska USC, Nebraska Washington. It's going to be Oregon. It's going to be fun games on top of everything that's already.
Think about Rutgers versus Maryland. Think about Penn State versus Slippery Rock. Because you're going to get beat up in the division. You're going to beat the hell out of each other, and you're not going to qualify. If they expand the qualification for a football playoff, then that makes sense. But otherwise, it's just dumb. It's a money. It makes sense economically, but that's the only way that it makes sense. When you make decisions just for money, you will come to regret those at some point. And this is a money grab. And you know what? God bless him. I hope it works out. I don't think it will. Here's the other thing. One of the reasons.
Why won't it work?
Because how many times has Nick Saban, Alabama team, played in the Pacific time zone since 1991?
I don't know.
That would be 0. They don't travel. Because all that travel adds up on a body. Listen, you and I travel for a living, and you come home after a 3-day trip, you're exhausted. Now you have to do that 8 times in 24 weeks. It's like, holy cow. The physical toll that it will take on these athletes is not being accounted for. It is enormous, and it will cost them, especially the ones that have to fly east to west, the ones that stay in the middle. So what I think will happen long term is there'll be enough teams for 3 divisions, where you'll have a Western, Central, and Eastern division, and you pick 2 from each of the other divisions, and off you go. That's the only way that it works for me long term. I don't see it working out short term from a health of the athlete standpoint, and from the fact that, listen, one of the reasons why the Pac-10 could never put anybody in the playoffs is because they beat the hell out of each other. And they travel a lot. It's far from Oregon to LA. That's far. It's like, Alabama to Georgia is a bus ride. It's not far. And so Alabama to Auburn, I think you could walk between the two if you really wanted to. The SEC has a built-in advantage in that you have a lot of schools close together and a lot of rivalries already built up. Now, trying to replicate that artificially across the country, it's a recipe for failure. So this only plays into the SEC's hands even more because they can just focus on keeping concentrated. They're not going after Boston College and Pitt. They're not going after Oregon and Oregon State and Washington State or Cal and none of those. They're not going after them because they know the secret. And the secret is you keep the geographic footprint as small as possible to limit the amount of damage that happens from travel. And that's how they end up so fresh at the end of the season to roll over everybody. And so I think it's a disaster waiting to happen. But we'll see in a couple of years.
You have to agree to disagree on this one, Uncle Bob, because you're just plain wrong about
that.
Like
I'm buying a house in Edina? Yeah, I know. Got to.
And like predicting the podcasting was not...
podcasting future, no future in this.
All right, so that's a good segue into predictions. And so the way I'm going to do this, I'm going to go first. Okay.
Okay.
And I'm going to the way I'm going to do it is group the wins and losses, and then I'll talk about one little caveat at the end. So I think we both the schedule and the home roster of teams is very much in our favor. So I think literally those are the 6 wins that you can sort of take to the bank. Okay, Northern Illinois, Louisiana Tech, Northwestern, Purdue. Although Maryland could be tough, and I think we can beat Iowa at home. Okay, now let's take a look at all the other games. So Minnesota, Colorado, Michigan, Illinois, Michigan State, and Wisconsin, all road games, all tough games. I think we're going to get one of those. Okay, so I think Matt Rule ends up in his first season. Now, as we get to see other teams play, I reserve the right to change this forecast. But I think 7-5 is the number for me, and I think they go to a decent bowl game, something that you're going to be proud of and recognize.
You just got more optimistic during the course. You said 6-6 like 5 minutes ago, and now you're at 7-5. I'm going to give you another hour, and you're going to be at 8-4.
Now 6-6 is like, I'm just setting that bar as being that would be a good accomplishment. My prediction is 7-5. I think we're going to win all the home games and one of the away games, and I will refine that as we go. Once we get to see, like for example, we're going to learn a ton about Colorado when they play TCU in the first week, right? It may be very obvious that Colorado doesn't have his game together yet. So we could Minnesota though, boy, they've got a lot of talent. PJ Fleck's running these guys, making them do great things, performing well over the last few years. I think that's going to be a very, very tough go in the first game. So 7-5, Bob. That's my. What are you saying?
I look at it a little differently. There's some big question marks with this team. The biggest question mark is how well they adapt to Matt Rule's system. Jury's out. Nobody knows. All we have is hope right now. And hope is not a strategy. But I'm sure that Matt's got his team lined up to play good ball. We just haven't seen it on the field yet, so we don't know what it's going to be like. That's concern number 1. Number 2 is they're young. Most of this roster is freshmen and sophomores. So there's not a lot of experience and depth not depth, but there's not a lot of experience at some of their key positions. So those are my concerns. Now, on the good side, it seems like folks have taken their strength and conditioning work a little bit more seriously than maybe in the past, and the players have come back in much better shape, at least from what I'm reading and hearing, than maybe they have in the past.
I would agree with.
Listen, when you're playing in Nebraska in the middle of December or middle of November, it's cold. You got to be tough, and you got to keep the meat suit nice and packed on there because it's a tough game, and people weren't. I don't think they were taking it seriously enough, and it's because the coaching staff didn't seem to take it seriously. And I may be wrong. I don't know. I'm not in the locker room. Just seemed that way. And last year, who'd have thought we'd have lost to Georgia Southern or to Northwestern? It's like
that was that literally. Remember this? That was the day we met Trev Alberts, and 18 hours later, Scott Frost got fired.
Yeah, it was
Remember
like,
that?
huh? Yeah, I'd have fired him too. It's all about the results on the field. And like, look at Rutgers. Rutgers is terrible. They have the worst record in the Big Ten since they joined. The Big Ten hasn't worked out very well for Rutgers. They shouldn't be in the conference, but they are. And now they bring back Rick Shiano, and maybe they'll do a little bit better. And we'll see. But
Cindy,
it's like
TV market though, bro. That's what's driving.
Somebody's got to lose a lot of games. Somebody's got to be who's going to be the new Rutgers. And that's the big concern that you have with having such a packed schedule. So let's go through this game by game. Let's put your stake in the ground game by game. Minnesota, a game that we will be at.
Yes.
What are you thinking?
I think it's a tough one. I think we probably lose this one 21-17 in a low-scoring affair. It's going to be a defensive struggle. Try to run the ball. I think they're just a better lineman on both sides of the ball. Now, I'm hopeful, as you said. I've heard every lineman's above 300 pounds, but we've had the worst set of tackles in the league for the last couple of years. So if Matt and team can make progress there, then we've got a shot. But I think it's going to be a struggle. I think we lose the game. I think we probably have a turnover or two. I think we lose the game in a low-scoring game. Now, again,
I'm taking Nebraska.
Okay.
You know why?
Why?
No Mo in Minnesota. Mo Ibrahim was fantastic for them. An incredible ball player. He's gone. Right. And he turned a lot of average plays into not average plays because he was just a beast. Gone. Now, I don't know who they have to replace him. I would imagine that if they had somebody good, that it would have played last year a little bit. And I think they're going to regress to the mean, and they're going to go take a step backwards this year. And so I'm picking Nebraska at a huge upset because I'm not wearing no Nebraska shirt in Minnesota without them winning the game. So
all right.
I think 1-0.
All right. So going to Colorado. Are we going, by the way? I've got the hotel rooms.
I don't know.
Well, that'll be a game.
Ask me next week.
Okay. All right.
Well, it depends on how they do the first week, I suppose. If they win, then we have to go. If they don't, then it's optional.
That's it. When we're going. Let's put it that way.
I would say that tickets to the Dion Bowl are going for like $500 a whack. So people are getting a little carried away. When you take out 2/3 of a roster and you glue back in, new guys, it takes a little while to set the edge. And he's got some really talented players. He's a good coach, great ball player, a good recruiter. So I think that they'll be a little bit better than people are thinking, but I don't think that they're quite there yet in terms of being able to step up and play, Power 5 football. So I would say that Nebraska wins, but the game's going to be much closer. And if Nebraska wins against Minnesota and loses against Colorado, then half the state is just going to have to lie down for an entire day and not say anything because they'll be very upset. But my guess is they're coming out of this. They're coming home 2-0.
Okay.
That's my call.
And I'm being much more realistic, saying 0-2, but still very optimistic for the year. Because again, I'm suggesting we're going to finish 7-5.
Wait, you think they're going to lose? You think they're going to lose to Colorado?
I do. I think
Colorado was horrible last year.
Yeah. Well, but Deion Sanders has done some great things in the areas that the coaching situations he's been in. We'll know a lot in the first week. I hope I'm wrong about this. I'm just a big game on the road, lots of hype. They're going to be hyped.
Cool.
He's got a system. Now, I'm saying they're going to finish 7-5. Now, here, this is if you're winning those two games, Bob, you're going to be like 9-3, and that just doesn't seem.
It's not. From reading everything that we've read, and again, we're not on the field, we're not at the practices, so we don't know.
You're presumably you're going to say Northern Illinois and Louisiana Tech are wins as well. So you're 4-0.
I would think so. I would think we're 4-0 through that spread. With Michigan coming into town. Just imagine if Nebraska's 4-0 and Michigan's 4-0 coming into that game. Holy cow, that's going to be a real barn burner.
4-0 going into Michigan. That's your prediction?
That's my prediction.
Have you just had a ketamine treatment or something?
You know what? I call this the storehouse of useless information. I'm spitting it out there. I'm not afraid. Because, hey, listen, if Nebraska goes 4-0, or if Nebraska goes 0-4, what difference does it make to me? It's a thing that I enjoy. I like it. I love it.
Okay.
I don't have to pay a tax if they lose games. I don't have to I don't get paid a bonus if they win. So if you're gonna be on the team, be optimistic. Because listen, like Matt Rule said, you fight for the guy next to you. You fight for the team. And if you're not fighting for the team, Mr. 0-4, then maybe we need a new co-host.
No. Look, dude,
Fight for the team.
I said at the outset that I think Matt Rule can be historically a Tom Osborne-like figure. Okay, because of the leadership that we have here, they're gonna sustain it. He's bought in. Part of the reason he came here was Ted Carter. Okay, long term, I think this is a huge move for Nebraska. We're talking about the first time out, and I want you to witness the Baylor first season and the Temple first season. Between them, I think there were 5 wins. Okay.
Yeah, but they were traditionally bad programs. Nebraska's always recruited some talent. Yeah. Cam Taylor-Britt's proven that right now.
Look, Nebraska 0.36% of their games, 36% of the games in the last 5 years. We are not good coming into this.
But they were all close games that they lost. It was chucklehead losses half the time. And
Tom Osborne did say Scott Frost would have had good record if the games ended in the third quarter.
Ow. Yeah, I think that comes down as a slap from Dr. Osborne. It's like that's about as ornery as he'll get in public. Holy
all right,
cow.
we got to pace. We got to get our guest on here. So,
all right.
Michigan
lose to Michigan.
Okay.
I think Illinois is a loss.
Okay.
I really like what Brett's doing down there. Northwestern is a win. Purdue is a win.
Yeah.
So I'm at 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 6 and 2. What are the other games here?
Yep. And then we got
Michigan State, and then they split the last 4. So what's that? 8 and 4.
So
8 and 4 is what I'm going with.
Michigan State's a loss. Okay.
I don't know. I think they're a bit of a paper tiger, but we'll see. Maryland is a win. Wisconsin's always tough, and Iowa, I think they pull it out.
All right. So I've got you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 and 4.
8 and 4.
And I'm at 7 and 5. So we're not that different. The difference is, do we get a win?
I do it optimistically, and you do it pessimistically. That's how.
No.
You're like, it's 7 and 5. Bring it to 7 and 5.
Expectation. We got no one. We got no player on the preseason all-conference team, and we got an incoming quarterback who everybody's excited about, but that turns the ball over more than any other player in all of FBS.
You know what you are? You're that boyfriend who's like, please don't hurt me.
Yeah.
Damn it, so many times in the past. Please don't hurt me. Be more resilient, Stockwell. Get out there and do some push-ups. 8 and 4.
Okay, I'm going to text our guest here to have him dial in, and while we're doing that, I'm going to talk about game week festivities. So, Bob, you will be there. We are hosting the Dean of Nebraska Business, Kathy Farrell, at the United Country Club for a luncheon on 11/10. Andrew Bunderman is going to be the speaker. Andrew was prominently featured in the movie The Outpost. He's a Minnesota grad, ROTC guy, works for Honeywell here in town, and received the Distinguished Service Cross for extraordinary heroism in the Battle of Kamdash in 2009 in Afghanistan, the most decorated battle since World War II. 2 living Medal of Honor winners coming out of that.
Is he bringing the medal with him?
I don't think so, but I highly recommend the movie. It's based on a book written by Jake Tapper, and here comes our friend David Max.
Hey, we made it.
We're gonna have to do a Jay's favorite war movies episode. It might take 3 or 4 days for us to get through all of them because Mr. Stockwell has a problem where he's addicted to war movies. Even though his service in the military. Thank you for your service, Mr. Stockwell, in that hotel in Italy. It was wonderful work.
So, David, meet Bob Frady. I talked about you earlier in the podcast. You are. I said Bob made a joke. I said you have touched more Nebraska people than probably anybody through Husker Max. And with your viewership is during the season is about 1.5 million unique visitors per month. Is that right?
Something along those lines, yes.
Yeah.
That's
so
crazy.
that is enormous. Yeah, it is an enormous accomplishment. And David has graciously agreed to be our season-long sponsor. So I mentioned that up front. This is the Sunday Morning Quarterback Nebraska edition, sponsored by Husker Max, and also Husker Max Property Fanalytics, which I'm sure David will talk about a little bit. But David, let's just start at the beginning. You live in California. You live in Orinda. Is that correct?
We live outside of Elk Grove, California, which is kind of a suburb of Sacramento, but I actually live out in the country.
Got it.
5 miles outside of Elk Grove, in a small town called Wilton, which is about the same size as my hometown of Page, Nebraska, with less than 200 people.
Okay. So
Wow.
Quinn, you've got family in Iowa too, don't you? Don't you have roots in Iowa?
Yes, my brother still lives in Shenandoah, Iowa, and
Okay.
I have a sister that lives up in Lake Mills, Iowa, and then my other sister lives in Lincoln.
So tell us, so we met in Southern California when I was living in California. Probably, we think it was at like a Husker watch party. And at the time, the site was called Huskerpedia. And ultimately, David acquired the property. You don't have to go into that long story, David, but rebranded it Husker Max. And for me, it's been literally the go-to site for 20 years for me on game day. I especially love the game day recap, the game page. You can literally go in there and get everything you need from the game, including, I think, a Fanalytics summary now too, right?
Right. That is done
summary
by my partner, Joe Hudson, so I can't take credit for the game page because he is a former copy editor for the Denver Post and Nebraska Lincoln journalism graduate. So he's like my wife. He can spot the misspelled word from across the street. So
just tell us David, how did you get started with your love for Nebraska? And I know it goes all the way back to the Devaney era and all that. Just orient the group there, and then how you really got involved in all these different things and properties that you're involved with. You're kind of a bit of an empire in my mind.
Well, my involvement with Nebraska football, like I said, my first strong recollection was when Bob Devaney's first year as coach in 1962, and that's what I based my book that I wrote 11 years ago now, about 50 years of Husker memories. So my Husker memories go back 61 years now. And
wow,
my first game was 1963 against Air Force, which we actually lost the game when we were heavily favored. So that was my first introduction. Wow. But my dad bought tickets to the South End Zone when it was built in 1964, and I've been sitting in those seats ever since.
That's the year I was born. Wow. How old were you that year, David?
I'm 72.
10. So maybe you can answer a question for me. Nebraskans, because they work, a lot of farming communities, are not necessarily the smallest people in the world. Yet the seats in the South End Zone are perhaps the tiniest seats in professional college football. Why is that?
Well, I get a stadium seat every time I go in, so I can at least map out that area. The stadium, the width of the stadium seat if we rent from the university. So, but they are somewhat tight and
they're a little tiny, but that's okay. It makes everybody stand up the entire game. Watching Stockwell get into one of those seats is always fun. Always fun.
David, have you ever been to Hardington?
Yes, I have. Matter of fact, I used to date a girl from Hardington.
Oh my God!
Yeah,
I might have dated her too. What was her name?
Her name was, if I remember it, Lynn Chalupka.
I would remember that name. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
Jade's from
her dad was a mechanic in town, and when I went there one weekend, and my fuel pump developed a leak, and I just barely made it into town, and her dad actually fixed it for me so I could get home or back to Kearney.
So I
was going to school at Kearney at the time.
That would have been like early 70s?
Yes.
Oh, that's cool. I was there. I was probably 7, 8 years old at the time. Well, that's cool. That's awesome. So talk about getting started with Husker Max. How did this all come about?
Well, it started out, I got involved with the internet way back when with the software company that blocked access to pornography on the internet, and I started creating a website in 1998 with all of my passions, and one of those passions was Nebraska football, and I got invited because of that small page to participate in what they called the Fans Network, which was like Husker fans, Sooner fans, and all of those. So I became Husker fans. And then that evolved into Huskerpedia, and now it's Husker Max. So
awesome. Total of about how many years?
Well, we launched Husker Max in September of 1999, Huskerpedia, I'm sorry, and at that time, I was looking for content for the website, and I came across what Joe Hudson had on the GeoCities free website with all of the games back to 1890. So I asked him, what would you charge me to put that on my website? And then he said, well, because you're a Nebraska fan, there's no charge. Everybody else just steals it. So I said, well, this is a good guy. so I approached him about creating a partnership, and we actually signed paperwork before we ever met in person for the first time, which was at the Colorado game in 1999.
So David, in this process, you've met probably because you've run tailgates and parties and bowl games, and you've met basically every personality from player to coach to politician, kind of ever involved in Husker sports in any way. Is that an overstatement?
I think that's accurate.
Yeah. So who's your favorite and personality that you've encountered? Probably there might be multiple. Just talk to me about that.
It's hard to pick one, but if I had to pick a single one, I think it would be Dave Humm. All right.
Really?
And Dave Humm, was a quarterback in the 73-75 range, and went on to be drafted by the Raiders and made a career as a backup quarterback to Kenny Stabler and others. And he developed multiple sclerosis, after his playing career, and he never complained, And so we were doing a fundraiser to raise money to buy a fire truck for western Nebraska, which is actually the eastern part of the state. But and to draw attention to it, I started doing a series of interviews with different people. So I got Dave's phone number and called him and told him, I was going to be in Las Vegas anyway for an event, and I could just come over to the house and do it. And he said, oh, no, because at that point in time, he didn't want people to see him in a wheelchair. And it's, because it was multiple sclerosis. So we did it over the phone. And then over time, we just kind of developed a relationship, and we would talk frequently, and he would talk to my mom when she was still alive, and they would talk football and life in general and whatever, and he was just so kind to her. And so later on, I found out that he had been in the hospital for like a month, and so I called him up and I said, Dave, how are you doing financially? I mean, with all your medical bills and everything. And he said, well, he's afraid he's going to lose his house. And so I said, well, let me just put a link up for a PayPal link, and we'll get you some funds. And he said, no, he's too proud to do that. So I said, well, why don't we do something like Mike Ditka's Gridiron Greats Foundation for former athletes with medical bills? And he said, okay, I'll do that. So I hung up the phone with him, and I called Jerry Murtaugh and said, this is what we want to do. And that's how Husker Greats got started, or Nebraska Greats.
That's a great story.
And Dave was the first recipient, so yeah, I still, his outlook on life, no matter how bad things were, was what impressed me the most. And so then I said, well, I want to get some signed footballs, and we'll get you and Vince Ferragamo to sign them, and we'll donate them to alumni chapters for their fundraisers or whatever. And so I said, do you want me to have them shipped to their house? He said, well, just come on over. And I thought, I just got invited to the Queen of England, to come to his house.
Yeah.
And so Don and I drove over. We made a round trip to Vegas, which is a 4-hour one-way, and spent the afternoon with him. And he signed a bunch of footballs for us, and we've had had 2 or 3 other in-person get-togethers after that. So he would be my most inspirational Husker ever.
By the way, I have one of those footballs on my mantle downstairs, so that's a great story. And did when did he pass?
It's been a couple of years now, and I'm still in touch with his daughter Courtney. Because he did everything for her. I mean, I'd write him a check for the footballs, and he'd give it to his daughter. That's just the kind of guy he was. and she is now involved with a nonprofit that helps underprivileged kids get to football camps, and they've got a basis out here in Sacramento, and they also do some camps in Omaha.
Well, that is a fantastic story. And he was the quarterback for 70-71, right? Both national championships under Devaney.
He was after Taggy and Bronson. Matter of fact, Taggy,
that's right. Taggy was the quarterback.
So Taggy and Bronson were the quarterbacks for the 70-71 teams, and he, I think it was like 73, 75, and then Vince Ferragamo after that.
Oh, that's cool. And you're close with Mr. Ferragamo as well, yeah?
He actually sold my house in Irvine.
Oh, neat.
He has residential real estate in Anaheim, and when we decided to move up here, because our daughter and her husband bought a house in Elk Grove, and so we figured they were settled in, and we had just finished remodeling and wasn't even thinking about it, and they kept sending us things of properties up here, so we finally found one that we liked, and so Vince, but it was contingent on selling our house quickly, so I went to Vince, and we listed it on Friday, had an open house on Sunday, and got an overpriced offer on Monday.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so
that's nice.
Well, I think he might
Very
be
nice.
I think he might be a great candidate for our next guest after the Minnesota game.
Well, that's what I was going to
think about that?
recommend. Because from a X's and O's perspective, he knows everything, and being a quarterback. And I can remember he was at the when we had a tailgate at the Fresno State game a few years ago. We sat with him at the game, and he would sit there and actually accurately predict a lot of the upcoming plays.
Oh, that's wild.
Yeah,
that's wild. That's
great.
How you feeling about the season?
Next to you.
How you feeling about the season? Jay and I are on opposite sides.
Well, I want to be cautiously optimistic. First year, but with the way things have gone so far, with the way recruiting and the transfer portal and everything, I would go with a season prediction of somewhere around 7-5. I think we're going to make it to a bowl game. I think 8-4 would be great. Okay. So, but that's kind of where I'm at.
David, you're kind of a genius, because Bob and I just went through this, and I'm exactly at 7-5.
Really?
And Bob thinks
he started out at 6-6. So it took him a little convincing.
No.
Little arm twisting to get him 7-5.
I think 6-6 would be in a bowl game would be a tremendous accomplishment for Matt Rhule his first year. Remember,
well, if you go 6-6, that means we lose the bowl game.
No, because there's
you
12
have to
games.
qualify with 6 wins to get a bowl, and then if you end up 6-6,
right.
that means you lost the bowl game. I want to win the bowl game.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
But we're just talking regular season schedule for now. So
okay.
So 6-6 would remember his first year at both Baylor and Temple. I think.
Oh, I know.
1-1-2.
Yeah.
1-1-3. So we got to be really, really careful not to get over our skis here, I think, and we got to manage expectations. And I think 6-6 in a bowl game would be huge. But as we went through the games, I think it's realistic that we could get to 7-5. Now, Bob was way over his skis, coming out saying we'd be 4-0 going into Michigan, right? So let's just go through those
hot.
One at a time.
Coming in hot.
So, David, what do you think about Minnesota? Do we have a chance to beat Minnesota?
I think we have a chance. I really do. I mean, they're favored by like 7, and it's a road game. They've had some of their off-season problems of their own, so I don't know if that's a distraction that's enough or not. But I think we'll play them tough. I think Colorado's a win. I just think things are
Yeah.
too much flux for Deion Sanders' first year, and the non-conference game. If we lose that one, we're in trouble.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
I'm even going to tell you what bowl game we're going to. You want to know?
Okay.
The Holiday Bowl. They're going to the Holiday Bowl. And they're going to play UCLA. It's going to be a harbinger of things to come. Lots of good press. You know why? Because every Nebraska bowl game I've been to happens to have been the Holiday Bowl. They went like 3 times in 5 years. It's like, well, we're going to the Holiday Bowl.
Right.
Because I live in Orange County, so it's right down the street. So,
All right, even so we're 3-1. We're
Orange
3-1 going into Michigan. 3-1 going into Michigan is what you're saying.
3-1, 4-0. I mean, I'll go along with 4-0
Yep.
going into Michigan.
Wow.
Well, I mean, like I
Wow.
said, the one would be Minnesota. I mean, if we're going to lose any of the first 4 games, it would be Minnesota.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
how
I think we
comfortable
could
the
win
people
that
of
one.
Nebraska be if
Huh?
4-0 with Michigan coming to town? Oh boy, people will be
Yeah.
pumped for that.
Yeah, I agree. It's a possibility, but I think we got-
Michigan would
we
be a
got-
tough hill to climb. That's you mentioned Fanalytics earlier, and I did some research with it last year, and I came up with 3 criteria, and it was time of possession, drives over 50 yards, and turnovers. So if Nebraska would win 2 out of the 3 of those categories, they would win the game. And so if they hold on to the ball and get a couple of sustained drives, we'll be in good shape.
So there's 2 data points that I shared earlier, David, before you got on. Pro Football Focus, who predicts preseason all-conference teams for the Big Ten. This is basically a company that feeds fantasy predictions, and so they have a really good idea on pro talent, right? There's not a single Nebraska player on their prediction for preseason on the first 3 teams for the Big Ten all-conference teams. Not one player. So this is a group that analyzes talent, right? So that's a concern for me, and that was actually called out by Nick Baugh on his podcast. And then
and this is where we differ, Stockwell. You and I both know you can make data sing any kind of song you want it to. And if you come in with a bias, then you guess what? You're gonna, and it's because so much is unknown. But I'm with David.
Yeah.
Going to the max with the Huskers.
All
Husker
right.
max.
Yeah, I love it.
8-4 Holiday Bowl against UCLA. Mark my words. You're gonna play this back in 6 months, and you can be like, that guy is scary.
We are writing that down, Bob. The other data point, David, that is concerning is that Jeff Sims, who's apparently like this physical specimen, Matt Rule says he has pro potential, which is great. But in 25 games as a quarterback, he had 23 interceptions and has the most turnovers of any FBS quarterback, current FBS quarterback. So that issue has to be solved. And that's, I think, why they're talking about running the ball. We've got a great stable of running backs, and this guy's a running quarterback. So let's run the ball and win games that way without turning it over. So we got to be really, really careful on that dimension.
I think also Georgia Tech didn't have a very good offensive line, and we need to improve. I mean, it's always one in the trenches, offensive, defensive line. If you don't have that, then it doesn't matter how good a quarter or how bad he is. If he doesn't have time to throw, he's going to throw interceptions.
That is exactly right. All right, guys. Well, I think that, David, any final thoughts from you? I think that wraps us up on our planned agenda here.
No, I think that's great. Thanks for having me on, and looking forward to.
We're going to follow up with you on Vince Ferragamo. That our next podcast will be the day after the Minnesota game. So if you'll make that introduction, we'll get that arranged, and that'll be really fun.
Be happy to.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys very much for participating in the inaugural episode of Sunday Morning Quarterback, Nebraska edition, sponsored by Husker Max and Fanalytics. Cheers.
HuskerMax.com. Go, go, go.